HOPS fans. This is a little video update for you on some new tools that we have implemented in the asset management system over the last week or so. This has been in response to a number of railways letting us know that the ORR are conducting asbestos inspections. So if you haven't heard about that yet, then you might hear about it soon. But we've put a few little extra tools in the asset management system to help railways demonstrate their compliance with some asbestos requirements. We're going to use this little A symbol that's in the bottom left-hand corner of the slide in HOPS to indicate asbestos. There are a number of other symbols that could be used, but we found that generally they couldn't be shrunk down small enough, or they were general hazards rather than asbestos hazards in particular, so weren't appropriate for use in the system. Here we are in Demo Railway. I'm going to show you two new asbestos related things in the asset management system. First of all, I'm going to go to the asset register. I'm going to go to my passenger coaches. I'm going to record a new defect on this carriage here, Brown Carriage F. And recording defects is going to be the mechanism for recording instances of asbestos. So if there is asbestos in carriage F, we'll create a defect. And even if you don't plan to remove the asbestos for 20 years, because it's perfectly under control, the defect will just sit there for 20 years, absolutely fine, waiting for the asbestos to be removed. So if there was some component families, I would pick them to indicate exactly where the asbestos was, but in this particular case there isn't, so I'm just going to write it in the headline, asbestos in roof. And I'll write some detail just in the normal way that I do. Nothing different so far about the way this defect is being recorded. And I'll record who reported it. And we'll do the normal risk assessment that we do whenever we record a defect, record the risk, asbestos injury, or asbestosis, or inhalation, or whatever you want to put. I'm going to put that the severity is quite high, even though the likelihood is very low, because I think this asbestos is well under control. So the new thing here is this new asbestos related option. And at the moment it's set to no. If I change it to yes, two further options appear. One for me to record the type of asbestos containing material, and one for me to record its condition. If I want to record what the containment measures are, then I'll use the control measure system for that, because that's the appropriate system for making sure that the control measure remains effective. And I'll press save. And here's the defect I just recorded, but you'll notice now there's some little A symbols on it for asbestos. And the A symbol next to the defect number indicates that this defect relates to asbestos. So that's why there's a little A now. Wherever you see this defect number in the system, there'll be a little A in a red triangle next to it, sorry, yellow triangle, to indicate that this is an asbestos related defect. The name of the asset also has a yellow triangle after it, and that's to let you know that there is some asbestos on this asset. Now, in this particular case, the reason for the asbestos on the asset is because of the defect that we are looking at. But if we looked anywhere else where it wouldn't otherwise be obvious, we would find that little orange A next to the asset name to let you know there is some asbestos on this asset. And that is arrived at because there is an open defect that's an asbestos related defect on the asset. If there was more than one instance of asbestos on the same asset, we'll record that as more than one defect, because they might have different conditions or be different types of asbestos and present different risks. So each individual instance of asbestos will be recorded as a defect. If I go back and look at my list of passenger coaches now, I happen to be on a passenger coaches asset register. I can see that Brown Carriage D has got the little yellow A next to it, so I know that is an asset that has asbestos in it. And similarly, if I look at all the defects on Brown Carriage D, there's the A next to the defect that contains asbestos. If there were other defects here that didn't relate to asbestos, then they wouldn't have the A next to them. Similarly, if I look at all the defects on all the passenger coaches, those are the two that have asbestos. If I go back up to the sort of the top level of the asset management system, I can see here a new little box, asbestos register. And if I click on that, I'll get a nice list of all of my instances of asbestos across the whole organisation. So these are all other defects that I've reported on assets that the defect relates to asbestos. So it's not every defect on all of these assets, it's only the ones that relate to asbestos. And this will be the number one place for a list of all asbestos in the organisation. When any of those defects are closed, they will disappear off the asbestos register. So the defect should only be closed when the asbestos has been removed. I should point out as well that the component and the risk assessment and all that stuff is just the normal defect reporting. That's nothing special for asbestos. We're just drawing that information in that already exists from the defect. I think we will probably also develop this table in the light of the feedback that you give us to include the control measures on it as well. So that's the first thing. All instances of asbestos can be considered defects, and that will facilitate the production of this asbestos register for the organisation. Second thing is auditing the assets that you already have, which I'm sure are in large number, to establish which ones actually have asbestos on and which ones don't. Because how do we know, for example, whether we've actually looked at carriage E, carriage Echo, and found that it doesn't have any asbestos, and that's why it's not here on the list, or we haven't looked at it yet. So the second part of these little tools is if I go back to the asset register, into the asset management system settings, and into maintenance tasks, I'm going to create a new maintenance tasks, and I'm going to call it asbestos survey. The survey to determine whether or not an asset has asbestos in it or not. And the successful completion declaration we will just make as completed, because this task is just completing the survey. It's not getting rid of the asbestos. You will, I'm sure, have a policy on how to survey for asbestos, and in that policy, if you add that any asbestos that's discovered needs to be recorded in the asbestos register by means of a defect, and then the maintenance task can be closed, then you will have a good audit trail of which assets have not yet had the survey and which ones have had the survey, and the completion of the survey means any asbestos that was discovered is now recorded as a defect and in the asbestos register. So I'm going to tick this new show in asbestos register box because this maintenance task relates to asbestos, and I'll press save. And once again, the little yellow A appears next to the name of the task, just to point out that this task relates to asbestos. I'm going to go back to my passenger coaches, and I'm going to say that carriage E, and in fact I'll say every carriage, but carriage E in this particular case requires that asbestos task. There it is, asbestos survey. I'll pick who is going to be the owner of the task. I'm going to put carriage and wagon manager. And because this is a task that may only need to be carried out once, because once it's been carried out, the continuing management of the asbestos will be via the defect. And if it doesn't have asbestos, and hopefully no new asbestos will arrive, we don't need to do the survey again. So I'm not going to put any frequency required at all, because it's something we're just going to do once and then hopefully not need to do again. If your system is different, and if you think, no, that's not acceptable, I want to do it every year, then of course that's absolutely fine. You can put in a requirement of 1 year or any of the other requirement options for a maintenance task. So there's the asbestos survey now required on carriage E. I will of course add it to all the other carriages to make sure that everything that could possibly need an asbestos survey or could possibly contain asbestos gets the survey. If I go back now to my asset register and then asbestos register, you'll see I've got a new tab here, and there will be a new tab for every task that relates to asbestos. So I imagine generally there will only be one, but if you did have more than one task that related to asbestos, I guess you could have the blue asbestos survey and the brown asbestos survey if they were different surveys. Then there'll be a task for each survey, and if I click on the task, it'll give me the details of the task, all the assets that require it, and whether it has been conducted or not. So if I'd added it to all the carriages, there would be a list of all my carriages there, and which ones had the task conducted and which ones hadn't. Don't forget, that doesn't mean that they have asbestos or they don't have asbestos. This is the page where we find whether they do or don't have asbestos. This is the page of whether we have looked for the asbestos or not. So I hope that helps. It was very rapidly produced in the light of feedback from our railways, so thank you very much to everybody who wrote into us about that. Some in a bit of a panic about the ORR approaching to look at their asbestos and their asbestos register. In the light of further feedback that we receive, we will develop it further, I'm sure, but that's it for now. I hope that proves useful. Thank you. Goodbye.